Okay, starting Siman Zayin now. Some people already started Siman Zayin, some people already middle of Siman Zayin, but we will start from the beginning of Siman Zayin. Siman Zayin deals with two very yesodistic concepts. One is, well, they're both connected. It's selling on a condition, on a Tnai, selling something or gifting something on a condition, and as a second topic, which is a continuation of it, the dinim of Asmekhtã, which means when a condition is inherently invalidated from the moment it was made. Today we're going to go through Sifim Aleph and Beis, mostly Sif Aleph, to go through the yesodus of conditions. The Mechaber begins by saying that somebody who sells something with a Tnai, with a condition, and the Tnai is something she'efshar l'kaimo, that is possible to be fulfilled. So then, if the Tnai is fulfilled, the sale is fulfilled. And if the Tnai is not fulfilled, the sale is not fulfilled. The Smer right away tells you, common sense, what's the Mechaber trying to tell you here? That if you made a condition that cannot be fulfilled, then the sale is valid and the Tnai is invalid. And then the Smek continues and says, all the dinim of Tanaim are learned from the story of Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven. Moshe Rabbeinu gave them Ever Yarden, and he told them what's the conditions are to get Ever Yarden, if your brothers are going to go to war, etc. And from there we learn all the conditions of Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven. I did go through it when I taught Hilchas Kedushin and Kailel Siman Lamed Ches Neven Ha'ezer. The video is online, we'll just go through it quickly. And those Nekudas is 4 or 5 points that are learned from Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven. The first one is Efshar l'kaimai. That's what we already see over here. First condition of condition is that it has to be something which can be fulfilled. Second one is it has to be Tnai Kafel. What's a Tnai Kafel? That has what you should do, and what happens if you don't do. And the next part of that, the third point is Hein Kaidim Lalav. First you say what has to be done, and then if you don't do it, Kach v'kach is going to be. Fourth point is, as we Tnai Kaidim Lamaisa, the condition has to be done before the action is done. That means not that you sell something and then you say, hey, I want you to also do this for me. That's not a Tnai. Tnai Lachar Maisa doesn't work. And the fifth one is that the Tnai has to be Bedavar Echad and the Maisa Bedavar Echad. That means that the action has to be done in one thing and the Tnai is in something else. Not exactly in the same thing, not that it's a Tnai which, like if Moshe Rabbeinu gave them the land, and not that the condition is attached also to the land, but that the condition was that they're going to go to war. Help out for the war. And then, if this Tnai was not done with all the conditions, then if it was done without the conditions, then the sale is valid and the Tnai you could just ignore. That is how the Smek explains. You say to the Mechaber, the Nesivis and Beurin Sivkot and Aleph, it says, obviously, all this is talking about when you say it in the lashon of a Tnai. You say it in the lashon of a condition. Not that you just say, I want you to do this, but you say, I am selling this to you on condition that you do kach v'kach. And if you don't do kach v'kach, this is what's going to happen, etc., etc. But if he doesn't say the word on condition, but he says a time constraint on it. For example, he says, he's not saying that I'm selling it to you, I'm buying this from you on the condition that I will be able to pay you in 3 months when I will do kach v'kach. It doesn't say the words on the condition. He just says, I'm buying it from you. When I'll have I'm closing on a big sale in 2-3 months from now. When I have the money, I'll pay you. That is not a condition. That is not a Tnai. That is it's not the Nesiva says. It's in the Dinim of Zman. The first Nesivas in Biurim. It's in the Dinim of Zman. It's not the Dinim of Tanaim. And therefore, you don't need all the conditions of Tanaim. That's one point the Nesivas points out. Second point the Nesivas points out. He brings the name of that Teres Tzvi, that we need a Tnai kaful is only in Karkois. When it comes to Metatlan, the minig is already that we do not require Tnai kaful. That's the second point. We will circle back to this later, in 45 minutes from the Mishpat Shalom. But just remember that point. That's a point when Teres Tzvi. It's based on I think on the Bedek HaBais. And the next point that Nesivas points out, if the Tanai is that you retain for yourself a specific right in the property that you sold, so he has a shir la'atzmo, a certain schos in the guf hamecher, in the actual thing that's being sold. Also, you don't need all mishpatei hatanoim, all the rules, because that is in the category of shir. Comes the Ramah and says, on this Sa'if, he says, hey, not all Tanoim have to be fulfilled. If the Moicher makes a Tanai that's only for the benefit of the Leikeach, he says, I'm selling it to you on condition that I'm going to give you $100 also. So then he says, Pitumi milu bi'alma. Stam, making the guy feel good by himself. It has no validity. The Smer right away tells you the mere fact that he brings it from the Rosh, that it's only the Lekeach did not repeat this Tanai when he purchased it. That means the Mercher said, I'm selling it to you on condition, then I'm going to give you $100 tomorrow. And then the Lekeach doesn't do anything, just continues weiter, because he knows that the Moicher is doing it to make him feel good. But if the Lekeach then says, I am buying this from you on condition you can give me $100 tomorrow, I'm buying this from you on condition I'm going to get a kickback. There's typical things. On condition, you don't write that in the shtar. We'll get to writing, What? Yeah, no, you never write kickbacks in the shtar. Then you get in legal trouble. You only say it Baal Peh, and even that, only if when certain people are not in the room. And so then it's a Tnai, because both parties agree to it. And it's a Tnai, it's not Pitum Milu B'alma, because the Lekeach repeated it back to him. And then that's point number one that Ramah says. Point number two that Ramah says, this is only if from Milchatchila this condition, the Tevas HaLekeach, was not there from the first moment of negotiation. Rather, they negotiated without any condition. At the last moment of negotiation, he suddenly throws us in. And so in such a case, we say that's Pitum Milu B'alma. But if from the first moment and on, it's in the discussions of this contract, then it's still considered a Tanai. The third point that Ramah points out, and this is a point that the Ramah, we'll call it somewhat of a controversial point in the Ramah, and it brings up a lot of dentatas and disputes come as a result of not specifically this Ramah, but the idea that's in this Ramah, which is if you make a Tanai and then you write a shtar and you don't write in the shtar the Tanai, then we say that al Tanai Rishon, they made a kinyan, that the kinyan, even though they didn't write it in the shtar, it was done al Tanai Rishon. This is something which, like I said, is something which is in dispute. And from there we're going to jump to a different Siman, which is not in your book. Siman Shin Lamed Gimel Din is Chilus Poyalim. I'm just going to give you a summary of what it says over there. In Sif Ches, in Siman Shin Lamed Gimel, the Ramah over there says as follows: a chazan which was hired by a community for 1 year with certain conditions. And then comes the second year, and he again hired himself to be a chazan to the same congregation, Elamai. In the meantime, the Gabayim changed. It's a different crowd. So we the Rama says, Vaday al Tnai Harishin Hiskir Atzmai. Since he went and he hired himself again, and there was no discussion of any conditions, Vaday al Tnai Harishin Hiskir Atzmai, for sure, he's following the previous conditions that were already put in place. And the smell over there says, obviously, the Ramah is giving you a chiddush, because if it's the same Gabayim, they for sure know that the conditions, so for sure that their conditions, the same conditions will remain in place for the following year. And the Shach in Sivkat Mem Gimel over there brings that also. But the Shach puts a condition over here. He says it's not stam any time that you renew, that you just hire yourself again. It's only if you hire yourself for the second year, you get hired for the second year, and you don't say any conditions whatsoever. You don't negotiate anything. They just come to you, they say, we want to hire you for Tavshin Pei Vav. And you say, I agree to be hired for Tavshin Pei Vav. And you don't renegotiate any elements of the contract. At that point we say, all the first conditions remained in place. But the Shach says, if for Tavshin Pei Vav you negotiated part of the conditions, let's say for Tavshin Pei Hey you had a condition that you're going to get 2 tickets and this amount of money, and you're also going to get, they're also going to give you a gift card for $1,000 esrog. Yeah, and that was part of your package. And the next year, you come and they negotiate with you. Let's say they give you a different price, they give you a higher price, and they pay your tickets, but they don't give you a car and they don't give you an apartment. They give you a different package, and you renegotiate your deal, and you don't mention. Doesn't say over there you're not going to get a car. It doesn't say you're not going to get a esrog, yeah, for this year. And then the Shach says, no, over here they renegotiated the contract and they rediscussed the deals and they mentioned specific Tanayim and they didn't mention any other Tanayim. It obviously means that the Tanayim which were ignored is because they're no longer valid. So you can't come with a Taina that you want this year also an esrog. That's...
it's not the case, you said the case here is talking about that year itself, the new Gabon. If it's the next year, then the Chalal, you can't say Tnai Rishon. There's no Tnai Rishon.
Sure there is. The Tnai, the community. Yes, and then he's rehired for the same community.
That's not Tnai Rishon.
It's Tnai Rishon. You continue. It's a new Tnai. That's what Tnai Rishon is.
Tnai Rishon is if it's the same Mecca. It's not the same Mecca.
It is the same Mecca. He's saying you're being a chazan again. He's continuing your new Hiskir Atzmai again. You can't change a deal in the middle.
No, the deal's already done. There's 1 year already. He was hired for 1 year.
Yeah, and the year's done.
The year's done, so it's not Tnai Rishon. The next year now comes.
And you say, and then you Hiskir Atzmai again.
So they can't say Tnai Rishon.
Sure, because you didn't negotiate anything else. That's what the Rama says. You didn't negotiate anything else. So obviously everything stays the same.
No, but you're saying the case about is that the new Gabon came in the middle of that.
No, the new Gabayim came before. Sometime the new Gabayim came in, whatever, there was elections for Gabayim in Sivan. So the new Gabayim can't come and say we are not bound by anything that was already that was done before. We're renegotiating all the contracts. That applies a lot in schools. The board changes, yeah, and you negotiate with a teacher, and the teacher has a 2-year contract, let's say. Every 2 years it gets renewed, every 5 years it gets renewed, whatever it is, yeah, or every 1 year it gets renewed, and the new board comes into play. And this happens all the time. A new board comes in, and they have to show that they're balabatim. Balabatim, yeah, they have to show that they're bosses. So the first thing they do, they review the contracts. I come to a teacher, says, Hayitachen, you're the principal, Hayitachen, we're in a financial hole, how are you taking $250,000 plus benefits? Well, I cut you down to $220,000. Yeah, well, we're not bound by whatever the previous board says. You've been doing it for the last 5 years for the same thing, and it gets renewal every year automatically. They say, no, I'm not willing to do it. Yeah, that, unless they both agree. If they make a new contract, it's something else. But if they don't say anything, they don't say anything, the new board doesn't say anything. And he continues his job, and he says, okay, now 2 years are up, Tavshin Pehei, the second year was up, and so we have a new board, and he comes and says, okay, according to my contract, I'm getting another 2 years. Okay, I'm telling you now that I'm taking another 2 years, like renewing for 2 years, and doesn't say anything else, and the board doesn't say anything else either, and they don't negotiate anything else. Then obviously they can't come in the middle of the year and they say, oh, paying you too much. It continues. Anyways, the Shach says that this is... Huh? No, I'm not doing Nachshav. This is about if Tanaim continue for what it was before. Now, but the Lavush disagrees with the Shach. The Lavush says that, and the implication, the Lavush says that even if they made other conditions, the conditions that are not discussed still remain in place. So he's still entitled to his Asher gift card for the second year. Yeah. Unless you specifically carve it out. That's the shit of the Lavush. Machlekes Shach and Lavush. And the Lavush, Shach brings the Lavush and says I don't agree with him. Now, the Aruch HaShulchan Sifkot Nechaftes brings the Shach and the Lavush, and it's not Machriya one way or the other. He brings the Shach first and the Lavush second, and it seems like he's goes the shit of the Lavush, but doesn't paskin one way or the other.
Which Shach? Which Shach?
Shach and Siman Shin Lamed Gimel, Sifkoten, Membeis and Gimel. The Pischei Tshuva over there, all over there, Shin Lamed Gimel, Sifkoten Yodalad, adds onto the Shach, takes the Shach's position, and he adds onto the Shach, and he says, based on the Shach, if there was a time frame for the first contract says you're being hired for 3 years. Yeah. And then when they renegotiated the contract, and they didn't mention a time frame. So according to the Shach, whatever Tanaim you didn't mention, when you renegotiate, fall by the wayside. There's no longer a 3-year term going forward. He doesn't explain what happens afterwards. Then it could be forever, it could be 1 year, but there's no more the condition that's in the shtar. The time of the shtar is no longer in place. Yeah. Huh?
How can another person come and redo this condition I did before? A teacher comes and says...
Wait, you can renegotiate whatever you want.
How do they do that? It's not enough time.
The end of the time, so comes the 3 years, the 3 years over. Talk about the 3 years are over. And now you're renegotiating a contract. And you don't mention a time frame for it, so there's no time frame.
It's not the contract that protects the employer.
The contract is what? Contract protects whoever writes it. That's how it's done. That's the problem.
So what do they do?
What?
What do they do? They just be able to fire whenever they want?
No, because there's rules when you could fire somebody. You can't fire a teacher, stamazai. After Purim, you can't fire a teacher. That's takonis of America, but that's not really relevant to this discussion. After many years, you pay them Chedesh Hashanah and you send them home. That's part of the discussion. If there's Srara, there's not Machlekes, big Machlekes, when you apply Srara and when not. And the Srara means you can't get fired. That's the Moshe's Sheter. The Srara means you get that Srara converts into a payment. And when it comes to teachers, it was accepted as pretty much by almost all Moshes in America, Torah Masada guidelines, and nobody really disagrees other than the Chassidish yeshivas. They're the only ones that have their own, didn't accept these takanas that were put forth. That's a Chedesh Hashanah, and not firing before, can't fire a principal before whatever, after Tu B'Shvat, after Adar, and you can't fire a teacher after Lag Baimer. These are conditions that have been in place for 50 years, 60 years, maybe even more.
Only when you go to New Year, basically.
You can't, because it's mitzad payal bottles, a lot of other halachas. It's not in the scope of Tavshin Pehei Kailo. I'm just bringing it out for the idea that a Tnai, the Ramah just says simply that a Tnai, which you say and then you don't write, Tnai Rishon Hisnu. Yeah. Now the Ramah over there continues and says, "This is all if the Chazan came and said, I wonder why I'm rehired for the next year for Pevov." But if he didn't do anything, he didn't say anything, he didn't say I'm coming for next year, and they didn't say we're hiring you for next year. And nobody says anything. Comes Shabbos Slichus, and then gets to Muhammad, and he starts singing Mitzvah Shabbos Slichus. Fine. So then he says, no, we don't say any of the Ramah says we don't say that everything continues as before. And the Ramah doesn't explain it. And the Shach says, I don't understand how this Ramah. If you look in the Rivash and the Ma'arik, which are the Mekar of the Ramah, such a thing doesn't exist over there, and therefore Tzarech Yidun. I don't understand what the Ramah is saying. The Taz also argues in the Ramah over there and says, I don't understand, and therefore the Taz disagrees with the Ramah. And the Taz says that there's no difference with Shasak and just continued working, it's also a Tnai Rishon. That means the Chazan agreed that the same conditions will continue further, and Shul agreed the same conditions will continue further, and the Aruch HaShulchan also paskins like that against the Ramah. Now, let's roll back to what we are discussing in this Siman, what the Ramah says. So there's a Mishpat Shalom from the Marasham on this Ramah, where he brings from the Tshuvas of the Baal Meginei Shleima. Yeah? Over there, the question was asked, if you wrote a Shtar Stam, the way the guy, the Rav who asked the question says, he says, if you wrote a Shtar Stam without any conditions, so then it's clear from the Ramah, the Tnai Rishon, right? That's clear from the Ramah. But if, we're talking about a sale, but if they wrote, go back to the sale, forget about the employer. This is why I put this before we go to this. Now comes Mishpat Shalom, and he says, on our Siman, on Reish Zayin, on this Ramah, he says, it brings this tshuva, if they wrote Stam Shtar without any conditions, so we have the Ramah. And if they wrote a shtar and they put certain conditions, certain Tanayim, but this specific Tanai that was discussed before Baal Peh was not put there, so obviously we don't say that Tnai Rishon is no. Huh? Shtas Shach in Shalom et Gimel. Yeah. And Meginei Shlomo responds and says, this makes no sense. The Ramah I also don't understand. Because the Mekara that Ramah is in the Rash, and over there, what's talking about when the Ramah says that you write a shtar and there's no Tanoim, that Tnai Rishon Hisnu. It says the Mekara that Ramah is talking about a case when they wrote a shtar in Erkois. They made a sale and they wrote a Goyish shtar. And in that place, the Goyish shtar never had any conditions in them. It's not a contract of sale, it's a transfer, could be it's a transfer of deed. Yeah, and you don't write Lav Dafka, you wrote these things in it. So, obviously over there, we say that Tnai Rishon, they did it. Because you never write any Tnaim. So obviously at Tnai Rishon they did it. But when we write a regular shtar, a Yiddish shtar, and Yiddish shtar does have Tnaim, and you didn't write a Tnai inside, how can you say, even if you don't write any Tnaim, how can you say that the shtar will remain, that the Tnai, first Tnai will remain in effect? The whole Yesod is that when a place where they never write a Tnai, that's when you don't, that's when the first Tnai falls by, that's when the first Tnai remains. But if the minig is, if we're talking about a shtar that the standard is to do write Tnaim, and you don't write Tnaim, any Tnaim, so you can't say Tnai Rishon Hisnu. And Adarabah, he says, it's a Chocha, the Ramah, in any form. That's how the Meginei Shleima disagrees with the Ramah. Then this is one thing that then he has a Mishmeret Shalom, which is the additions of the Mishpat Shalom on his own book later. In Sifkot Yud Beis, in the new prints of Mishpat Shalom, it's they put them in the right places. But and the Avdan Mishmeret Shalom Sifkot Yud Beis, he brings from a tshuva Zichrin Kehuna, that Zichrin Kehuna brings an interesting thing from דיני Shchiv Meira. There's halachas of Shchiv Meira and Cheshim Mishpat Siman Reish Nun. What's the halacha over there? You have a Shchiv Meira that makes a whole list. I want to give this to this person, I want to give this to this person, I want to give this to this person. You give the whole list, 12 people on the list, aside for his kids. He gives giving to this moise, to this house I'm giving to this person, this car I'm giving to this moise. Then he thought he's going to die in 15 minutes. Lamaise, the Malach HaMavet didn't show up, so he's up for another 45 minutes. So he changed his mind, and he had enough time to change his mind, and he retracted 5 of the 12. Didn't say retract. Say, I don't want to give I change my mind. I don't want to give the house to this mice. That's too. This mice doesn't need the house. I don't want to give the car to that rabbi. He already has 2 cars. I'm done. I don't want to give this. And change his mind. The Shulchan Aruch over there says that chazar b'miktzas and chazar b'kulon. The fact that he started retracting and he retracted part of them, will retract all the 12.
Even one of them.
Even one of them. Yeah. The stuff they remain his, and when he dies, his kids are Yerushet, or whoever the Yerush is. So based on that, the Zichron Kahuna says the same thing will apply over here. That if he made certain Tnai, made 12 Tnai for the sale, or 6 Tnai for the sale, and then he changed his mind on one of them, we don't say that Al Das Rishayna and everything else remains. Rather, everything gets cancelled. And he adds another point. What? For this. It's not matnas shchiv mirat, a sale of Tanaim. That's the Zichron Kahuna. He adds another point. Yeah, yeah, well, he's using it as a proof that for Tnaim, because Tnaim is in itself not a standard thing. You make a sale, you sell something, you move on. You want something in exchange for the sale, get it before. The whole concept of Tnaim is also in itself a interesting thing. Carve outs in things. So then he says another point. He says if they wrote if they discussed certain Tnaim, but they didn't write them in the shtar, which is what we have over here in the Ramah. Then he says if it's something that if there's a reason, al pi yosher das bnei adam. Means if according to logic, this is something which makes sense that a person will change his mind on. I mean, it's not something crucial. Now, it's not like getting a sregim delivered out of Sukkot. 2 weeks before Sukkot versus 2 weeks after Sukkot. It's talking about something which is not also follow on. It's not the end of the world if it's not there. So then we say for sure it was Michael. There's no question about it. Means we don't say al Tnai Arishin Hisnu. We say the fact is he made it and they discussed it tonight, and then they realized that it's shtusim. It's not that important. That's why he didn't mention it again. Then the Mishpat Shalom, Mishmer Shalom refers to Pischet Shuv and Siman Kuf Yud Beis, Sifkot and Beis, in the name of the Chavas Yoel, that if a lender and the borrower have they had whatever a loan that's supposed to be a condition was discussed, and then the lender received the shtar, and the shtar does not have the condition, he accepted the shtar. He reads it, says okay, good, and the Tnai is not there, then we say that it's clearly a mechila, because he should have commented right away and he didn't. Now, we want to go to... Now, we did mention that you have to have a Tnai Kodim L'Maisa. Going back to the Shulchan Aruch, you have to have a Tnai Kodim L'Maisa, right? One of the 5 Nekudas from Tnai B'nei Gad B'nei Reuven. And the Smeh also gives you a simple thing, common sense. Why do you have to have a Tnai before? Because after Kinyan, Tnai is done. The deal is sealed. You can't add anything to it. The Smeh Sifkot and Hey by us. Now, Knesset Agdel over here brings a bunch of interesting points. Also, on Siman Reish Zayin, he has between Hagoas Atur and Hagoas Beis Yosef, he has 400 pieces, 500 pieces, but I'm not going to go through all of them. So we've got a few interesting ones on this Sif. Hagoas Atur is Gimel. Interesting Hagdara. You know, and the yeshivas like to have agdoras, definitions for things. He brings the name of his Rebbe. He says, my Rabbi wrote, Tnai is not negeder from Piran, it's negeder from Matana. That's how he says it. What means it's not a negeder Piran, negeder Matana? You have to fulfill Tnai. Yeah, obviously. I do a sale with two parties to this deal. I do a sale. We did all the Tnaim, all the Tnaim of Tnaim we did. So it's all good. And then I and you, so I have a commitment to you to fulfill the Tnai that I agree to. That is not Medin Piron. That means it's not something that you could then come and it becomes a choiv on me to fulfill it. A choiv, that's like a choiv, a financial choiv. No, it's, even if it's me giving you presents, even if it's me giving you something extra, it's only matana. That's Ois Gimel. One-liner from the Bichlal. Most of the things he quotes from his Rebbe are one-liners, so that goes atur. Once in a while he has longer. Once in a while he has longer ones, but this is only a short one. Ois Vav, he brings an interesting Maram Mitrani, he brings from Maram Mitrani, and he says the Maram Alshech, and other ones also say the same thing. If you make a Tnai and you don't have a time frame for the Tnai, then, and it's a Tnai which has to kum vasei, that means something which you have to do, Tnai that the other party has to do something, then it's perpetual. If you tell a guy that you sell, that there's no time that you could say.
Yeah, but wait, if there's no time, then what's it in?
Leilam vad. Kum v'aseh leilam vad, which means that the moicher can never come to Bezdin and say that Tnai was not fulfilled, I want to retract the sale.
That guy can't sell to the guy.
Now the other side, also the buyer can't go weiter until he fulfills the Tnai.
No, he doesn't have to fill it out. He has a whole life to do it.
Yeah, but how can he sell the property?
He can't.
I'm saying is, the buyer can't sell the property weiter until he fulfills the Tnai, and the seller can never come to Bezdin and say, I want to take the land back because you didn't give it time for it. And then that's an Ois Vav, and Ois Yudches, he brings the same Maram Mitrani, and he adds another point to it, and he says it's forever as long as the Tnai could still be fulfilled. Once the Tnai can no longer be fulfilled for whatever it is, then obviously if you can't fulfill the Tnai anymore. Yeah, then it says the Fira Yisayna Bezdin to decide what to do.
Why? Because if we just said Yefshel L'Kaimoi.
It's not Yefshel L'Kaimoi. It was Yefshel L'Kaimoi.
What?
It was, but now what's L'Olam means? L'Olam means you're supposed to do it as long as you're able to do it. On condition that you make it on condition that for there's a snowstorm today. On condition that you take my snow, you shovel the snow in front of me, in front of my house. Yeah. So it's L'Olam. I didn't tell you when. Well, the Maisa, the snow's going to be gone in 2 days, hopefully. I don't know what the weather's going to be like, or maybe in a day. Right? It's not. You're going to say what? I sold it to you in 2 days. I didn't shovel the snow. I can't do it anymore. Is it Mecher Kayam? No, Dafka. So shovel my. If he said in condition that you shovel my snow once, you don't say when. You could say you didn't say which winter. And it goes the whole discussion. We say Pesach it's a different Siman Shulchan Aruch. If I say that I'm going to pay you by Pesach, could I tell you it's Pesach Tovshin Tzadik, or it's just the first Pesach that comes? So that's a whole different discussion if we don't say Zman. Yeah, let's not get into it now. If the Mekabel, that means the buyer was supposed to do a condition, and he died. And now becomes a machlokes if you fulfill the condition or didn't fulfill the condition. The seller says the buyer didn't fulfill the condition. I want my land back. The Yorshim say, well, our father fulfilled the condition. the Yoshim have to bring a raya. In Ois Yud, he brings from a Radbaz, and the Radbaz completely disagrees with the Ramah, that if you mention a Tnai and you don't put it into the shtar afterwards, the Tnai is Nimcha. In Ois Yudal, he brings from the Marshach, that if you have on the same sale, you have two shtaris. The seller has a shtar signed by both parties that has all the Tnai. The buyer has a shtar signed by both parties which has no Tnai. So the buyer doesn't have to fulfill anything, even because you have two shtaris and they're both signed, and nobody says one shtar is false. We say even though both shtaris have the same date and the same everything, but one has Tnaim, one doesn't have Tnaim. The one who has the shtar that says no Tnaim is the one who does it. It doesn't have, you can't be mevatel mechin if Tnaim are not fulfilled. In Ois Chof, if the Tnai is not a kumvasei, Tnai is you should not do something. A prohibition on you to do something. He brings to the Maram Trani that if you want to be mevatel the mekach, the seller, he's the one, all of the aviraya that the other person violated what he was supposed to do. That means the koine doesn't have to bring a raya that for the last 15 years he never carried in the eruv. Something like that. Tnai. The seller is the one who has to prove that the guy violated the tnai. That's in Ois Chaf and the Maram Mitrani. Ois Chafei brings from the Maria Adarabi, if there's no Tnai written in the shtar, and now the seller comes and says, "Oh, the Tnai Baal Peh." Now we're following the Ramah, the Tnai Baal Peh, and then afterwards you wrote a shtar and you didn't put it in, Tnai Arishan, so that's a Tnai Baal Peh, obviously, it's not in the shtar. So according to Shittas Ramah, if the seller comes later and says, "Oh, the Tnai Baal Peh," Tnai Arishan, we did the condition, and he didn't fulfill the Tnai. He was supposed to do something in 30 days, he didn't do it. He is not trusted to say that it wasn't fulfilled. Interesting. Over here is because there's no denial on the Tnai. If there's a denial on the Tnai, for sure is nothing. However, the Moichel has to bring a proof that there was a Tnai. We're talking about there's no denial on the Tnai. The seller says, "Yes, Tnai Haya, and I fulfilled it." I mean, the buyer says, "Tnai Haya, Baal Peh, I fulfilled it." The seller says, "Tnai Haya, we didn't fulfill it." So he's not Neman to say it's not fulfilled. He doesn't explain why, but it's clear. Migo could have said, the Tnai was never there, and then you're stuck. In Ois Chavav, he brings in the Maram Galanti. No, actually, we'll skip this one, it's not so relevant. Huh? What's the Migul Haitzi? You're not taking it from the seller, you already have the property. Yeah. Otherwise, what? It's a kinyan etin is a whole different thing. That's the next sif. I'm going to sell you something, it doesn't work. It's Asmekhtã. Mata Shimon also brings a few interesting points I'm going to bring to an Ois Aleph. He brings that what we spoke about from the Knesset Agdela also brings it in Ois Aleph, the same Nekuda. What happens is he brings in Masas Moshe. If you have in the beginning, they made this, the Mata Shimon brings in the Gostra herself, the name of the Knesset Agdela, of the Masas Moshe. They made a bunch of discussions of conditions in the beginning, and then they didn't write them in the shtar. So obviously it's Mechila, right? That's the Radbaz's shit and other people's shit. That's what the Masas Moshe says. Comes the Mata Shimon and says, I don't understand how could somebody say such a thing, that all the Tnai, that if a Tnai if Tnai was not written in the shtar, we don't say a Tnai Rishon, and we'll just discuss, we say it's batal, it's Mechila. The Mari Basan takes exact fakert. He says, just like the Ramah, pretty much, the fact that he goes even further. The fact that they didn't even bother to write it is a yichach al tnai rishon. Obviously, you don't even have to discuss it. It's so clear that I have to. It's something obviously al tnai rishon calls. If it will be all the time, we'll have to write it. But this is so clear. Like, okay, I have a conversation with you, and we discuss all the terms. A little paper, okay, sold. Weiter. Obviously, it's based on what we just discussed 15 minutes earlier, or a half hour earlier, or a day earlier. And that's what the Rosh says, and the Rosh is the source of the Rama. Yeah, the Rosh is the source of the Tur. The Tur is what the Rama brings. So that's how he says. So he says, I don't understand how the Masas Moshe ignored the Maribasan and the Rosh, and the Marimat also ignores them. I don't know how they do it. So he says, Taka the Masas Moshe brings the Rosh in a different tshuva, brings the Masas Moshe in a different tshuva, brings the Rosh, and he makes a carve out in the Rosh. He says the Rosh is talking. When is the Rosh talking about? When you did all the Tnaim of Tnaim, but you just didn't put it on paper. So Kofal Tnai and Tnai and the whole thing. You did everything. You just didn't write it on paper. Then Taka the Rosh will say that Tnai Rishon Kehisno, because you went through the whole process of doing everything according to the rules, and you just didn't put it in the paper. So it's not Tnai Rishon Kehisno. But if they didn't go through the whole thing, it only was a Gilui Das. He tells him, I'm selling it to you on condition of this and this, and he doesn't go through the whole Tanai Kafel and everything else. Then the Rosh will say, no, it's clear that even the Rosh will agree that there's a Mechila. Why? Because if it would be so important, they would reiterate it again by the Sha'as HaKinyan. Huh?
They will do it properly.
Yeah. And Ois Beis,
Tnai Kafel is worse.
Tanai Kafel works, yeah.
But that's when you try to secure the deal that he wants it.
Yeah, but you make the Tanai Kafel if you do this or you don't do this. In Ois Beis, he brings a story as follows from the Sha'as Ephraim. Interesting way, Tnai that could be done or can't be done. A worker wants to learn how to do a certain malacha. He goes to a professional and he says, you have this factory, I want to learn from you how to do this malacha. I want to learn the tricks of the trade. I'm agreeing for my education to work for you. Every week I want to learn how to do install air conditioners. Every week I'm going to install 10 air conditioners for you, for free. And if I only install 8, and because of that, you have to hire somebody else to install 2, I will pay you. I will pay what it costs for that person. Comes the Sha'ar Ephraim and says, right? The Tnai, how can I commit to install 10 air conditioners? I only started working. Maybe I don't know how to do it properly. Maybe we're not going to have as many people to do it. So Yev Shalasis. Sha'ar Ephraim says, no, it's not Yev Shalasis. Because the second half is Yev Shalasis, that I'm going to pay you for the work that is not done, then obviously that it works. Because half of it after Lasos already makes the whole Tanai being valid. You're going to say, so al smach vos is he paying him? So he says, no, you're paying him to teach you. In this case, you're paying him to teach you. That's the reason. Yeah, it's a Sha'ar Ephraim. Interesting Sha'ar Ephraim. Can I pass like this? L'alacha veisich nisht.
What's the Tnai?
The worker.
The fact that he's going to pay?
There's two. The worker has 2 conditions on him.
This is 2 conditions.
2 conditions, and even though one is EF Shalasis, the second one is F Shalasis. It's not Tnai Kafel, huh? Not by moment. We'll get to that soon. Not by moment. No. That we already mentioned from the Nesivus that by metaltalin it doesn't apply. Only by karkois it applies. In Ois Yud, the Mata Shimon says, talking about this, that Tnai Kafel, if you need it in Mamoina and metaltalin, it's a machlikas rishonim. With the suffix lo yitzonu yitzim yadam b'chuzok, over tafas yitzim yodei. which is classic for the Mata Shimon and for the Knesset Agdela, whenever there's a Machlokas Rishonim, I mean the Sofik Lo Yatzanim, it's Yimid HaMuchzuk, and Tfisa is Moyel. Unless it's against a clear Mechaber. That's the only time that you can say Machlokas Rishonim Tfisa. In Ois Tes Vav, he brings a very interesting tshuva from the Rambam. But he rephrases the tshuva of the Rambam. He says, a person went and sold this field. Why did he sell his field? Because he's getting divorced and he has to pay his wife's ksuba, right? So he goes and he sells his field and he tells the buyer, I'm selling it because I have to, I'm lighter going for a get. And I'm going to have to pay hefty ksuba, and the only asset that I have is the field, this little field over here that I got from my friend.
Is the fact when he needs the money?
He needs the money.
This is the hundred zuz that he pays for the field?
Not 100 zuz, whatever he pays for it.
Not that case.
Whatever he has to pay. And then, says the Rambam, he brings it, V'naise loy nes v'loy girsha. That's the Lashon he says, the Mata Shimon, quote, word for V'naise loy nes v'loy girsha. A miracle happened and the get didn't happen. Then the Mekach is invalidated. It's done. Give back the field. Like it's Naise loy nes. Ois Yud Zayin. I found it interesting that if you're ready to get divorced and you don't get to change your mind, it's a nes. Ois Yud Zayin. If you sell a house, this is more relevant to Sif Gimel, but still, if you sell a house and you tell the buyer of the house, I'm selling this house to you on Lincoln Place because there's this house on President Street that I'm going to buy. And then that house burned down. So he sold and everything went fine. And the house, he sold on Lincoln Place, he got the money, and now he's going to buy the house on President Street. And there was a fire that day. The house completely burned down, he can't buy it. So then he brings, Mata Shimon brings, and Machlokas, the Panimidus holds, not the Panimidus that we know, it's a much earlier Panimidus, that the Mecher is Chayzer. The Bnei Moshe holds that it's not Chayzer. And that, if he didn't, the sale was already done. Now, this is interesting machlekes, but this is from the Mata Shimon. If you look in the Pischei Tshuva, Sifkot and Beis, in our Siman, he brings a Taz from Yeridea. Taz and Yeridea in the end of Siman Reish Lamed Vav Sifkot and Yud Gimel. A Tnai that was not Neskayim because of Oinus. The Taz over there says that it depends if the Tnai is the Yesod of the Maisa or not. That means if I buy from you 1,000 Esrogim and I make with you a condition that it has to arrive in New York by Motzei Shabbos Slichos or by Monday of Slichos, and no later than Same Gedalia, I'm giving you a whole week of space. And the Maise, there was a strike in Italy, or the ship got hijacked by the Houthis or whoever is busy hijacking ships today. I don't know which team. That depends on the day. Or Nigerians, I don't know, whoever it is. And the Maise, the Sregim came on Yud Gimel Tishrei. Yeah. So, could I be mevatel the Mekach? So the Taz says, yeah. Why? Because the Ikar of the Mekach is that. The Zman is the Yesod of the Mekach. He doesn't give the example of the Sregim, I'm just giving you, he talks about the Zman. The Zman is the Yesod of the Mekach. I need it for Zman Pliny. There's nothing I can do with 1,000 Sregim on Yud Gimel Tishrei. Because by that point, the only people who didn't buy a Sregim are the ones who are looking for a deal or waiting for the things that are going to be sold on Kingston for $15 a piece. Or 25, and you get two, and you get the double adasim for it. Nobody else is buying them. Not always. So that's bottle. But if the Tnai is not crucial for the Maisa, the Taz says the Tnai is not bottle, the Mekach is kaim, and the Tnai is gone. Even though you made a Tnai, you're going to get it, Lizman Mesuyam, but it's not crucial for this. It's not crucial. It's not time sensitive. It's not something which is going to it's not matzahs before Pesach or donuts before Hanukkah. It's something which is it's always. If I'm not getting it today, I'll sell it tomorrow. Flour or whatever it is. It's not something which goes bad. So then, no, the mekach is not bottle. The shach over there in the Kudas HaKesef already disagrees, so I'm not asking with the Taz. And the shach references shach here not in our Siman, but in Siman Chaf Aleph. Shach Sifkot and Gimel. Over there, he says no. You can't say that if the Tnai is not Ikar, suddenly we're still going to be, the Maisa is Kayam and the Tnai is bottle. No. Oines, Rachmana Patre. Yeah? Oines, the Eibishter was pointed you from Oines. But the Eibishter was never Mechayev you because of Oines. So, there's no Oines Rachmana Chayve. So, you're now going to force the guy to say, because the seller had an oinus and delivered it 2 months late, even though it's not crucial to you, and it's not negate to go from Isa, you can still sell it, you can still do everything, you can still make a lot of money off it. There's no oinus rachmana chayve that you have to accept, that you have to fulfill the mekach. It was bought, the tnai was there, the tnai is bottled, tnai is bottled. Machlekes shach and Taz. And he brings a beis meir that holds like the shach, and he brings all the achreinim that he says that all the achreinim hold like the shach, and he says the beis meir goes even further. That's even lahoitzi mammon. What does it mean lahoitzi mammon? That even if the buyer already paid for the schayra, the buyer paid for the schayra, yeah. But now 2 months came late, and it's a tnai which is not chashuv for the actual business deal. We still say that Tnai, being that the Tnai was nisbatel because of oinus, the Mechira is bottle, and lahaitzi, we take the money out of him. Out of the seller, he has to refund the money to the buyer. So that's machlekes, it's similar to his 2 shittas that are brought in Hashem. Now let's go into Mishpat Shalom. Mishpat Shalom has about 9 pages just in the first 4 words of the Sif, on דיני Tnai. And he has a few yesodis that are important to discuss with. First one, he says, it goes the whole discussion if we say if metaltal in mammon needs tnai kafel or not. And he says, and the Sivas brings the teres tzvi that you don't need the tnai kafel and metaltal. Why? There's a machlekes rishonim if you need tnai kafel and metaltal. If you need tnai kafel, this is a machlekes is born in Even Ezer. If tnai kafel is only by yisurim, like by kedushin, or also by things. So it's teres tzvi brings from that the minig is to follow those opinions that say that you don't need a tnai kafel, but only they only applied it to a metalton, not to karkois. Yeah, elamai. The minig was accepted to follow this shit. Even this shit is not really la halacha. We accepted to follow it. And what's the reason? And then he brings from the Kol Chaim and Hilchos Pesach. He brings even more so, even that you need a Tnai, that you don't need a Tnai kafel, but a Tnai works, yeah? Kerchaim, yeah, that it says it has to be the lashon of the Tnai. It has to be a lashon of a Tnai, not a lashon that I will do something. Or it has to be a lashon of Tnai, and then it works. You don't need Tnai kafel.
Sivas says.
I mean, Sivas, yeah. Who's the Mekar Chaim?
Huh?
Who's the Mekar Chaim?
No.
Sivas.
Really? Pesach.
Yeah. Huh? One of them is Sivas. Mekar Chaim is Sivas. A lot of times you'll see parallels. He's also Chavazaz, and also and Gittin. Slipped my mind. Was Teres Gittin, right? Teres Gittin also in Sivas. Yeah. You'll see. You'll follow through. You'll find the tracks in most of them. The same as the Smeh is also the Drisha. So you find a stira between the Smeh and the Drisha. It's not because it's 2 different people. It can be Metar. It says 2 different people. Metar is 2 different kufas. Huh?
He always quotes
The Smeh quotes the Prisha. Yeah.
doesn't add as much cross-reference because the smell wanted you to learn the Torah.
Wanted you to learn the Torah and the Drisha and the Prisha. He looked at the, and what's the reason why today the minhag is to not do by metaltal and Tnai kafel? Very simple. He says either mitzad it was established as a minhag, but why was such a minhag established? Pashut because takonas hashuk. You're going to start having every time I'm going to buy a potato, I'm going to have to start making a Tnai kafel with you. A sack of potatoes. It's going to take 15 minutes for a purchase. They'll never have any business deals going on. Karkais is the longer process, or because Pashut people don't know. People have no idea. When it's a karkois, they'll go to Arov, they'll figure out they'll get a proper start. When it's metaltalin, they're not going to have time, they're not going to do it, and they're just going to mess it up anyway. So that's why it was invalidated. You don't need all the Tnaim of Tnai by metaltalin, you don't need all that. Then he goes to a discussion now, if I write in the start of karkois, the minhag is to write, Kol nasek Tnai b'nei God b'nei Reuven. They state in the status. So the Goyis Maimonides, he brings from the Goyis Maimonides, that if I wrote in the shtar, Hakol Naseh Tnai b'nei God b'nei Reuven, I don't have to make any more Tnai kafel. Why? Because the shtar itself says that it's something Tnai b'nei God b'nei Reuven. Yeah, but you still need a Tnai koydem l'maaseh. That's a chakam. The chakam and the Bishmol and the Kansakdel, they all say you still need, by karkos, even if you write Tnai God b'nei Reuven, and you don't require any more Tnai kafel, you still need Tnai koydem l'maaseh. You can't completely abolish Tnai b'nei God and b'nei Reuven, and then write on the shtar, I made it according to Tnai b'nei God and b'nei Reuven. That doesn't work. That's one point he brings. Next point he brings, he says, if the business was done, this is he brings in parentheses, he says if the deal was sealed in Erkos Shel Goyim, by court, that's when they did the whole thing. And in Erkos Shel Goyim, you still need to do all the דיני Atnaim, even though the Erkos do not require it. And he says, what happens if you don't do it? So he says, maybe it works because since you went and Dafka did it by Erkos Shel Goyim, means that you showed that you want to do it the best possible way according to the Goyim. So I died of the, no, not Asmechtã, don't worry, you put it tonight. No, it's not Asmechtã tonight, it's not Shef Shal Asayse. You did it in the way that the Goyim did it. He says, Tzorichin. It's Tzorichin if it works, if you didn't do all the Tanaim of Tanaim. Then he goes back to the whole Tnai koydem l'maaseh and karkos, and he says, what happens if you did not do a Tnai koydem l'maaseh, and you wrote Tnai b'nei God b'nei Reuven, then this shtar is still b'nei Reuven, it's nothing. Yeah? L'chayro, he says. Right, the lek asmachta, it's asmachta. If it's asmachta that shines in your eyes, then we ignore it. The lek asmachta, we say that when you wrote the lek asmachta, it's also an asmachta. Maybe, it says no, but maybe it could work even if you do without it. Why? Because in Siman Aleph and Sifyud Beis, the Mechaber writes that if you write a shtar and you write at the end that it was nice kechol kechoymer the meyat kinyan kechoymer kol tnaim shtiga chachamei nozal kechoymer kol kinyanim and everything, you wrote all the nusach at the end of the shtar, and you didn't do all the tnaim, you didn't do all the kinyanim, but you wrote in the shtar of the thing. The Mechaber says that it works. And then he brings even more. He says there's a Chavas Yair which says that if you stam wrote a Tnai and you didn't specify Tnai kafel or anything else, a big chiddush of the Chavas Yair that he brings in the Tshuva, he brings the Mishpat Shalom brings him. We say that Mistame, he did it ba'ofen hamoyo. Probably if he did it right. Which reminds me, I got an interesting shaila recently. If somebody didn't write a heteriska and now he wants to collect interest, do we say that Chazaka, that he does not want to do an Aved, and he obviously had in mind to do a Heteriska, and whether the guy pay interest or not? It's very interesting Chiddush, gehalten as a shtus, but there was some Rav which passed, and yeah, for sure. Can't say that the Yid wanted to do an Aved, so obviously, even though there's nothing, it's a regular note, and it has interest and everything, it's obvious that the Yid is not going to want to do something against Torah. So obviously, you should pay the Heteriska, Chas v'shalom. It's also. The Malva wanted to charge.
They agreed on interest without it,
yeah.
You can't write them with that.
Huh? I'm afraid. The question is now he wants to collect interest, and the loiva now says, I don't want to pay. Yeah. So they asked a certain Rav, a Chacham, and he said, what do you mean? The guy's not based on, I don't know if he even knew this Chavas Yer, I have to know Chesribis, because the Shtashish Beribis doesn't work, but stam. Now, the Mishpat Shalom says that this, that you wrote a Tnai in a Shtar, and it works because Mistama, they did it right, is only if the Shtar, a big Chiddush in Mishpat Shalom, he adds over there, in Mishpat Shalom, and the Mishpat Shalom says, not a Chiddush, but an interesting point, that it's only if the Shtar is written in such a way, we already did this Tnai. Not that we're doing it on condition. We agree that this is going to be the Tnai. We're might that this is going to be the Tnai. Then it falls into the category of Haidah, not into the category of a Tnai in the Shtar. He says, the Chavas Yer says that we Mistama did it Kahaiga, and it's only if the Tnai is written B'Lashon Avar. Because then it's a Haidah. The Haidah is different, as we discussed in a different share. Then he says, then he concludes, the Mishpat Shalom concludes over there, that anyways, because in Karkos there's so much machloikus about which Tnai is needed and when and how and what you wrote in the Shtar and everything else. So if it's a Tnai that was not done according to דיני HaTanayim, and we have a suffix on it, im tafas ein matzim miyodai. Why? Because it's machlekes. And in Mishmer Shalom, Sifkot and Gimel, which was written later, he takes it back a little bit. And he brings a B'shal Struas Parach Mata'aren, nicht as a Pasha that you could just say machlekes, 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 and Motzim Yad HaMochzak. Nicht as a Pasha. In Karkos, when Tnai, if you didn't do a Tnai Kafel by Karkos, is it enough that you wrote in the Shtar Ketnai B'nei Gad B'nei Reuven? And if you didn't write Ketnai B'nei Gad B'nei Reuven, do we say like the Chavas Yer that Mistama did the Tnai properly? And if you didn't do it, when you didn't do a Tnai Kodem L'Mais, are we going to say it's a Stilim B'nei Yobei or not? All those things.
So, Chavas Yer said that you could go back and say he did it up to today, right?
Yeah.
Why this person was so off?
Who? Satirisk is an Isur. Talking about here Tnai that you forgot to say the words that you're supposed to do. And if you're not going to do it, kach v'kach, you're going to lose the land. You forgot to do it Tnai Kafel.
Wow,
There's no, No, because you can't be moitzi now. You can't say now that the Yiddish we over the suffix is a deraisa because of a svara that Mistama they both had in mind to do it properly the first time around. You can't extend the scam of a heteriska so far. Now the Parach Mata'aren in Mishmer Shalom Sifkot and Gimel brings the Mishmer Shalom Sifkot and Gimel brings the Parach Mata'aren. If there's a suffix in the Gufa Kinyan, if the actual Kinyan worked or not, then the Karkas B'cheskas Meicher. Because you have a suffix if the Kinyan ever happened or not. So if you have a suffix if the Kinyan ever happened, then how can you be Moitzi Karka B'cheskasei? But if you don't have a suffix if the Kinyan was good or not, you know the Kinyan was good. You have a suffix if the Tnai was good or not, then we say that it's, and then the whole discussion is Yochel Achzer and Yochel Achzer. In such a case, then ein suffix moitzi midevadai. But there we moitzi miyad hamochzak. And we are done for today, or we'll continue. We'll continue in the afternoon. We'll finish. Okay. We stopped in the middle of the Mishpat Shalom. One more point in the Mishpat Shalom, then we'll move on. The Mishpat Shalom deals now with a Tnai. If a person, what the Ramah mentions, if a person makes a Tnai only for his own benefit. Right? So, that over there, the Ramah says Pitum Mili B'Alma. But let's say a person does, if he does it for the benefit of the other person. Yeah? What if a person does a benefit only for himself? The seller is doing a benefit that's only for himself. That's the Tnai. Now, could he make Mechila on that Tnai? And he decides a month into it, he's not interested in continuing the Tnai. He wants to make a Mechila. And therefore, by the time when Mechila happens, that automatically, or at least in certain scenarios, creates a kinyan. Which means that the other person acquires it, right? By regular Mechila. So over here, if there's a Mechila on the Tnai, which in essence will now make the kinyan valid, does it work for the seller, or let's say the buyer has a Tnai, let's whichever one whichever one has the Tnai, and he feels that he wants to settle this matter once and for all, instead of waiting for the Tnai to happen, he's doing the Tnai, he's waiving that Tnai. Does his Mechila work to recreate the kinyan on the spot? And then the Mekach will happen. And he explains that, well, it depends when the Mechila happens, obviously. If it's within the time of the Tnai, that means if the Tnai was supposed to happen within 12 months, and within 12 months he went and he does the Mechila, and then it works. Because it's before the Tnai expired. Therefore, there was still a time that he could be Meichel, the action of the Tnai. But if the time of the Tnai passed already, that means it was supposed to be done within 12 months. And now 12 months pass, and the Tnai was not fulfilled. So the Mecher technically is already bottle, and he wants to be Meichel. So the Chayra, the Mechila, is not going to recreate, is not going to create a new, and not going to create a sale. He says it's a doubt. Could be yes, could be not. So he says, he brings a raya from the Chacham Tzvi that it really depends on what kind of Tnai it is. That means a certain Tnai that when the time passes, the Tnai is bottle, and the Mecher is bottle. But there are certain Tnaim that even if the time passed, if you could still do the Tnai, that doesn't mean the Beis Din might tell you, do the Tnai, rather than cancel the sale. Certain scenarios that it happens. In such a case, if the Tnai was not yet bottle, then the Mechila could still have an effect. In other words, as long as the Mechira is still, the sale is still pending, a Mechila could make it happen. But if the Tnai kicked off, already started the process of canceling the sale, then the Tnai can't cancel, and therefore the sale got canceled. So Mechila is not enough to create a kinyan. And it goes back and forth in Mishpat Shalom. You could look at it over there in the Maaseh, stays in the suffix. Why? Not because he has a suffix in the words of the Chacham Tzvi. The Svar of the Chacham Tzvi makes sense. If the Tnai is bottle, the Mechila is bottle, then the Mechila doesn't work. It's because there are so many options on how to understand when a Tnai is completely bottled in such a way that it automatically invalidates the Mechira or not. So because there are opinions on that, so it's hard to determine the point when a Tnai that expired creates a voiding of the sale, so therefore he left it in a tzarich. Now, I'll go to a different point that's connected to this Sa'if. So, and this will be the last point of Seif Aleph. The first Pesach Tshuva on Seif Aleph has an interesting story. A Tshuva. He brings a Tshuva from somebody from the Shus Yaakov. What happened? The person sold his house. And the Lekeach said, I'm willing to pay. I'm going to pay. But when will I pay? 30 days before my son gets married. This and this son gets married. Lemaaseh, he died. The son is not yet married. And the son says, I'm not interested in getting married. I'm raining a bacher. So now the sale is stuck. l'chayra, yeah, because the son is the one who's supposed to pay his father's debts. And as long as he does no zman piran, because it's 30 days before he gets married. So he could live in this house, so to speak, rent-free, until he decides to get married, until he finds a girl, and he can push it off as long as he wants, and he's not interested in getting married. The Shus Yaakov was asked, is such a thing could happen b'chlal or not? So he says, the Shus Yaakov answered as follows. By a boy, the Gemara says, the age of 20 is the age of the latest point at which you could get married. So the day the boy turns 20, it already becomes a chiyuv mammon on that day to pay the debt, the sale price on the father. Doesn't make a difference. So if the son was 19 and his father died, when the son turns 20, that day he has to pay it. Because that is the time when he was supposed to be married.
Are we like assuming what the father was trying to say?
That the Shus Yaakov doesn't, but Avnei Choshen doesn't. That we'll get to in a second. And he says, but by a daughter, it doesn't say in Gemara what time it is, how long it is. So therefore, that could there's no shear. The Gemara says Asher Talbin Saira, Teshav Beveis Asher Talbin Saira. So there's no real shear for it. That's a Pischat Shuvah name of the Shus Yaakov, and doesn't bring anything else in that matter. Now, what's interesting about this is that I had a question on it, and I don't have an answer. Why is it that if there's a time frame of 30 days before the son gets married, so 20 is the latest point, l'chayra should be 30 days before his son turns 20, but it's not what the Pischat Shuvah says. So just leave it at the question. There's Avnei Choshen that brings us Pischat Shuvah. Avnei Choshen in the new prints, the blue books, it has it Al Seder Shulchan Aruch, and the old prints is in the Ashmatas to the Siman. That he says as follows. He says what the Pischat Shuvah is talking about is when there is no specific reason why this was done. Which means could be a spiritual reason, could be this. The father had the money. And we don't know why he didn't want to pay. For whatever reason, he decided maybe he thought it's a sgula. We don't know. And the seller agreed to it. He was on board with it. So in such a case, we have to go through this whole discussion. But if it's because the guy does not have money, and he believes that he's going to find money, the Avnei Choshen says, this man piran is right now, this tnai is not the tnai. Why is that? He says, if he thinks he's going to be able to get money 30 days before his son's wedding, and that could happen, his son could get married in 30 days from now if he finds a girl today, yeah? So then, let him find the money now. It's just kicking the can down the road. There's no reason for it. And if it's because the father had a doubt if his son will ever get married and he wanted to leave it, so to speak, hanging in the air and get himself a free ride, so then he's anyways chayav now. Why? Because no seller will ever agree to get fooled into such a thing that he'll never get paid for his property and not have the property either. So whichever way you slice it, if the guy Taka had no money and he was planning on getting money, then the Zman Piran is right away. There's no such thing as waiting for later. So that's what not the Avnei Choshen did not say that, but I was thinking about it. I was reading the Avnei Choshen that l'chayra, maybe if he thought that before the wedding he could probably get a gemach and they'll be able to pay it, and he'll just make the wedding cheaper or whatever it is, something along those lines. Yeah, but that's not what Avnei Choshen writes, and I thought about that svara before. It's a good svara, but I don't have yet a mocker for it unless you want to get listed as a mocker. Then we move on to Sif Beis. The Chaber in Sif Beis says, Yesh Oimrim. All that we discuss in Sif Aleph about a Tnai and the Tnai getting cancelled, and if the Tnai is not Niskayim, then the Mekach is bottle, and if the Tnai is Embiyad Lasses, v'chulu, is all if the Kinyan was done properly. And then afterwards the Tnai has to be made, and then there's a chiyuv on the other person to fulfill the Tnai. But if no kinyan was made now, rather a condition was made first, yeah, because we already know Tnai koydem l'maisa, but over here, what's the Tnai koydem l'maisa? A Tnai that was koydem l'kinyan, the kinyan wasn't even done yet. He tells him, if you will do kach v'kach, then you will be koine. Not that you're koine now on condition that you will do kach v'kach. No, if you will do kach v'kach, then you will be koine. That doesn't work. That's Asmektã. And Asmektã is not koine. Smachta that you're relying on something that's going to happen later doesn't work. And the Mechaber says, unless you tell him Meyachshav, or a kinyan was made. That's a big argument how to understand that point based on the Rambam. Yeah, the Smeg right goes into it. And this is based on the way the Beis Yosef understands the Torah and understands the Rambam. That Asmachta, if you say Me'achshav or you make a kinyan, it works. And he says, no, that's not what the Torah is referring to. The Torah is referring to, according to the Torah, even if you make a kinyan on the future, on Etin, it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Because Asmachta, the kinyan itself is based on Asmachta. And therefore, since the kinyan is based on Asmachta, this is the understanding of the Smeh, then in the Risha, the kinyan is based on Asmachta, so you can never have anything, the kinyan is hanging. The kinyan itself is a Asmachta. Since the kinyan itself is Asmachta, so then the kinyan never kicked in. So the only way it's going to work is if it's Me'achshav, because if it's Me'achshav, then the kinyan kicked in right away. If the kinyan kicked in right away, then the Tnai is no longer an Asmachta. That's soon, when he gets to understanding the Rambam. First he talks about... first he talks about the Avon of the Torah, in the beginning of it. Then he says, according to the Rambam, the way we have to explain it is as follows. That it goes in the kavanah of the seller. That if the seller had in mind that the main thing that the seller cares about is the sale, and the Tnai is only that he's, okay, while I'm having a negotiation with this guy, I might as well get a bonus deal out of it, bonus round out of it. So then it works. Why? Because we know that his main intention is the sale. But if the main intention is not the sale, the main intention is to get this thing done by the other person. But he knows that if he's not going to sell him the field, he will never be able to get this done by the other person. So he's using the field sale as an incentive. So then the main thing he cares about is the Tnai. In such a scenario, then that is a Asmachta. In such a case, you need the Me'achshav.
That's specifically quotes the Rambam? That's specifically quotes the Rambam?
Yeah. The Torah quotes the Rambam, but when the Drisha says, the Rambam is a problem because he doesn't mention the kinyan Me'achshav until much later. He has seven halachas and he doesn't mention kinyan Me'achshav till the seventh halacha. That's the problem that the Drisha has with making it the way the Rambam, the Beis Yosef understands it. And then if it's an asmachta, the only way it works is if it's me'achshav. And if it does not say me'achshav, even if the Tnai was niskayim, and even if the person was machzik, it still doesn't work. On that the Shach says shortly tzarich. His understanding tzarich doesn't explain it. Taz also doesn't understand. Doesn't say that he doesn't agree with the explanation of the Smeh, but he also has a question with the understanding of the Beis Yosef and the Rambam, and he explains the Rambam a little bit different. That it depends on when it was done. If a kinyan was done first, and then right afterwards you made a Tnai on the kinyan, that means you say you coin it, and right afterwards you say, hey, but you cannot take it home until you do kach v'kach. Then that is not an asmachta. Why? Because since he made the kinyan first, it's mashma l'kech was already koine. So there was a kinyan me'achshav, not me'achshav, a kinyan achshav. And then afterwards came the Tnai. In such a case, the Rambam will agree, will say it's not, it's definitely not an asmachta. But at first he says the Tnai. And his main intention is taka the Tnai. And afterwards he does the kinyan. Then the whole kinyan is predicated and based and dependent on the asmachta, and therefore the kinyan itself is an asmachta. So the kinyan itself is an asmachta, then the only way it's going to work is if the kinyan itself is also me'achshav. And if you look, there's a long biur agra, and the biur agra seems to match up with the Taz. If you want to expand further on this specific thing, you have a long nesivis, biurim sivkotin beis, chidushim sivkotin hey, where he goes through this. Smeh, but I didn't want to make it too long. Yeah. Now I just want to finish with two interesting points from the Knesset Agdela that are negeya to Asmachta. One is Nagoyes Atur Ois Peites, in the name of his Rebbe, also a one-liner. He says, Mechila and Siluk are not a kinyan. are not hakna, are not a sale. Right? Matane is a transfer of something. Hakna, Mechira is a transfer of something. Hakna, siluk, that I'm just saying I'm removing my ownership from this, or Mechila, that I'm just waiving it, those are not full haknas. They're not a transfer of something. He says, but then Asmechtã also works. It means don't think that Asmechtã only is there when there is a actual full hakna. Asmechtã will apply also if there's just a partial hakna, like a mechila or a siluk. That's an aggressive respect. Huh?
Isn't that a machlekes?
What if mechila itself? Yeah, I'm saying the way he just says, the Aggressive just brings us one line from his Rebbe, doesn't bring anybody else's. Whenever he quotes his Rebbe, doesn't quote anybody else. At least not in the same paragraph. Now he's Tzadik Vav, we'll jump to the next thing, it's not an interesting thing. He brings a stira in the Sefer Chassidim regarding Asmechtã. In Sefer Chassidim, Siman Ayin Aleph, it says that if there was the ship is on the sea, and it's rocking, and it's too much weight on the ship, and decide, let's do a yaina, let's do a geirel, and whoever his name pulls out, we'll throw him overboard. Sefer Chassidim says Siman Ayin Aleph. And he says, it's not Asmechtã. Why is it not Asmechtã? If by moments such a thing is not Asmechtã, how come by nefashos? That's in Sefer Chassidim, Siman Ayin Aleph. Geirel is not Asmechtã. Nobody really expects that he's going to get thrown over.
I'm asking to get thrown out.
Good. So now comes the Sakdel and asks a Shaila, I have a stira, because if you look and say for the Chassidim itself and Siman Resh Ayin Tes, it says that if your name comes out 3 times, they do throw you overboard. And it doesn't say it's an Asmechtã. So he says, I don't understand. He leaves it as a tzarich here. So I was thinking about it. It's taka kasha, but then it could be that 3 times is already yois asmechtã. If you're ready to take 3 times a chance of your name coming out, it's no longer an asmechtã. You're ready to go overboard. 1 time is maybe asmechtã. Huh? You're not makna your guf.
Your guf belongs to David, so you can't.
You're not jumping. They're throwing you.
You're giving them the right to.
Oh, they're not giving them anything. If they decide and they're all there and they think they're all going to die, they're not going to ask you any questions. The question is if it's an asmechtã, if they're all Jews. That's the last point I want to say. If you're discussing asmechtã, you should understand the Knesset Agdela found a stira of that by getting thrown overboard. So in case this shaila ever comes up to you about who to choose for doing it, you should know Sefer Chassidim has in one place an asmechtã, in another place it says 3 times works, if your name comes out 3 times. And Knesset Agdela says the stira, and the Knesset seems like he holds it to asmechtã. What? You could say like the Knesset Agdela, it's a sveika de dinner. So if you're not thrown over, you don't have to get thrown over. If you get thrown over already, then you don't have to pull you back out. Huh?
Should bring an extra life jacket.
Anyways, with that I'm going to conclude. On Thursday, I'm going to get ready into Asmechtã. Since we started Asmechtã, I want to jump into the later sifim that have to do with Asmechtã and focus on that.